few nights ago, Mark Levin sat in his Fox studio and told you that Donald Trump is purifying the Republican Party, and he said it just like this.
I want to address two subjects during my opening here: Iran and the president improving the Republican Party. That's right, improving the Republican Party.
Improving the party. I want you to hold on to that word. His argument went like this: Trump going after Republicans in the primaries like Thomas Massie and the rest is the same thing that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did to the Democrats in 1938. FDR tried to purge the members of his own party who wouldn't get in line with his New Deal. And Levin says it's a good thing. It's a sign of strength. He says that Trump is doing what FDR did, but more effective, because FDR mostly failed and Trump doesn't. Here's the heart of it in his own words.
What Donald Trump has done is what FDR tried to do but failed.
What Donald Trump has done is what FDR tried to do but failed. That's the argument. Now I want you to watch just how fast it all falls apart, because Mark Levin has spent 30 years telling you that Franklin Roosevelt is the villain of American history, and he's right. He's the father of the bloated administrative state, the man who broke the Constitution's limits on executive power, the original sin of American big government. And Levin wrote books about it. He built a career on it. And now he's telling you that being like FDR, purging your own party, ruling through fear, bending it to one man's will, is the most Republican thing a president can do. Well, Mark, you can't have it both ways. Either FDR was the villain that you've always said that he was, in which case being more like FDR is the problem, not the proof, or FDR was a model of party leadership, in which Mark then owes 30 years of his audience a sincere apology. So which is it, Mark? Here's what I actually think happened. I think that Mark reached for the first historical analogy that flattered the man that he wants to flatter. And he never checked whether it actually said the things that he needed it to say, because if he had read the documents that he's going to talk about, the actual platforms of the party, the actual record, he would have found that the FDR story just doesn't prove that Trump is improving the party. It proves that Trump is capturing the party. And by the end of this episode, I'm going to show you with receipts, not my opinion. I'm going to use the Democratic platforms of 1932 and 1936. I'm going to use the Republican platforms of 2016, 2020, and 2024. And then what I saw with my own eyes inside the room where the last Republican platform was actually made. This is the story of how two men remade their parties in their own image, and they called it purity. And how Mark Levin either doesn't understand that or is counting on you not to understand it either. I'm Dan McKnight, and this is the Bring Our Troops Home podcast. Let's get to work.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Now, a quick word on why I'm the guy that's telling you this story. I am not a talk radio millionaire blowhard like Levin. I'm not a guy with a Fox News set and hours a day of broadcast time. I don't have the president posting on Truth Social to watch my show each night so that I can provide the smokescreen for his ever-changing foreign policy decisions. I simply did 13 years in uniform, United States Marine Corps, the United States Army, and the Idaho Army National Guard, and I deployed to Afghanistan in 2006. I've worn the thing that men like Mark Levin spend their careers sending other people's children to wear. And I didn't watch what I'm about to describe on TV. In 2024, I was elected by the Republicans in the state of Idaho, one of just two people from my entire state to sit on the Platform Committee of the Republican National Convention, the body that's supposed to write down what the party believes. And I want to show you something. See, these are my delegate medals or badges they give you. They give it to you like a military medal, like you did something important. This is what I got for being a delegate to the RNC in 2020 and 2024. I'm not showing you that to brag or to provide any self-gloss, but I also want to show you this. This is my credentials that I had to wear around my neck on a lanyard because I was on the Platform Committee, and only 112 people in the entire country are on that committee. I was sent to Milwaukee to do one job, to carry the principles of the people who elected me into the platform of the National Republican Party. So when we get to how the platform actually got made, I'm not reading you somebody else's story. I was in the room. And I'm going to be very careful about the way that I walk through this. And I'm going to separate what I witnessed from what's already on the public record, because unlike the man that I'm about to take apart, Mark Levin, I think that line matters. Levin, whose entire case rests on one claim: the leader doing the improving or the purging is the one faithful to the party platform. That's what he means by making the party better, improving it. So let's test it against the only thing that can't be spun. We're going to use the documents, the actual documents. We'll start with FDR first, because Levin, he's the one that brought him up. I don't like to talk about FDR. He's literally the biggest villain in American history. But since Levin brought him up, we'll start there. Then we'll do President Trump. 2 chapters of the very, very same story. Here's the thing that Mark Levin doesn't want you to see, stated plainly so that you can watch it in both stories. In a republic, the party works from the bottom up. The people show up at the precinct meetings, at the county conventions, at the state conventions, and they write down what they believe. And that becomes the platform. And that platform is the party telling its leaders what it stands for. And if you want to ride for the brand, if you want to run as a Republican or run as a Democrat, you have to adhere to the platform. You align with the platform and you legislate for it. The leader serves that document. He's accountable to it and he's judged by it. But FDR and Trump, they turned that process upside down. They made the platform serve the leader. They rewrote it or replaced it to mean whatever they already wanted it to say. And then they went after the people who still believed in what the party used to say and called those people traitors. Folks, that's not purification, and that's not improving the party like Levin says. Purification would mean bringing the leader back in line with the people's principles. This is the reverse. It's bending the principles to fit the leader, a king deciding that the law is whatever he says it is and punishing anybody who dares to point at the old law. FDR did it to the Democrats between 1932 and 1936, and Trump did it to the Republicans between 2016 and 2024. It's the same move, it's the same playbook. Mark Levin looked at it and called it Republican. Let me show you FDR first. Now, before the documents, I want you to watch Levin himself reach for FDR, offering the comparison admiringly as the precedent that Trump is surpassing.
And people say, look at this. He knocked off a senator from Louisiana. He knocked off a senator from Texas. He knocked off this crazy congressman from Kentucky. Who does that? A little bit of history. FDR tried to do that.
You caught that, right? He said FDR tried to do that. So let's look at FDR. In 1932, he ran on a platform that called itself, in the Democrats' own words, a covenant with the people to be faithfully kept by the party when entrusted with power. And what did it promise? Smaller government, a drastic cut in federal spending, not less than 25%, by the way, a federal budget annually balanced, a sound currency preserved at all hazards, and government removed from the fields of private enterprise. Balanced budget, sound money, Washington out of the economy. That's the platform that FDR won on in 1932. Now, you know what he actually did. We all know what he actually did. We all know about the New Deal. He didn't cut spending by 25%. He exploded it. He didn't balance the budget. He ran massive deficits. He didn't preserve sound currency. He took us off of gold and devalued the dollar. He created so many new agencies that they ran out of letters in the alphabet to name them. Every major promise in that covenant broken. Now, I'm going to be fair because being fair is what makes this bulletproof. It's something that Mark Levin won't actually do. A lot of Americans were actually glad that he broke them. The country was on its knees and people wanted bold action. You could have argued that the New Deal was right in the moment. I won't argue that. In fact, I wholeheartedly disagree. But the argument exists, and so you should have that argument. That's not the argument, though, that Levin is making. Levin says that FDR was faithful to the platform, and he purged the people who weren't. And that's just false, Mark. One might even call it, fake news. The conservative Democrats FDR went after were the ones still standing on the 1932 covenant, the balanced budget, the spending limits, the sound money. They didn't betray the platform. They attempted to keep it. So how do you purge people for betraying a platform they're the only ones still keeping? It's simple. You just rewrite the platform. And in 1936, the Democrats wrote a new platform. It didn't come up from the grassroots like it always did historically. It came down from the top. You're not going to believe this, but I'm going to try and lay it out and show you exactly what I mean. The chairman of the Platform Committee that year was Senator Robert Wagner of New York. He was FDR's chief legislative lieutenant. He's the man whose name is on the Wagner Act, tied to nearly every major piece of New Deal legislation there is. This was not a neutral referee. This was the president's man. And the reporting on the convention, the New York Times and other academic articles at the time say that it was Wagner and Roosevelt together directed the preparation of the preliminary draft of the platform. Picture that. The president and his closest lieutenant write the document. The same circle of people who 4 years earlier coined the phrase New Deal and put it in FDR's mouth. And then the draft goes to a committee chaired by the same lieutenant. The deck wasn't just stacked. The deck was printed at the White House. And here's the tell, the obvious one. FDR told you himself what the platform actually was for. Watch Mark Levin read it from an FDR fireside chat. Levin hands you FDR's own justification for the purge and never stops to check it himself.
But he says later, with the head of the Democrat Party charged with the responsibility of carrying out the definitely liberal declaration of principles set forth in the 1936 Democratic platform, I feel that I have every right to speak in those few instances where there may be a clear-cut issue between candidates for a Democratic nomination involving these principles or involving a clear misuse of my own name.
All right, so follow that logic where it leads naturally. FDR says, I can purge these people because I'm the one carrying out the 1936 platform. But remember, who wrote the 1936 platform? He did. FDR did. His lieutenant chaired the committee. The justification is a closed circle. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. I can purge you for betraying the platform that I rewrote to mean whatever I already wanted it to be. That's not fidelity to principle. That's a man grading his own paper and then expelling the students who used last year's textbook. And the new platform read like the leader's resume. We have done this. We have done that. The balanced budget promise, it was softened to a someday aspiration. The 25% cut, it vanished. Sound currency rewritten to bless the devaluation he'd already done. Government out of the economy, he replaced it with a celebration of government reaching into banking, farming, labor, housing, and power. They didn't just abandon the 1932 covenant. They wrote a new one to ratify breaking it. And they dropped the word covenant entirely. You don't call it a binding contract right after you've shown the country that your contracts actually mean nothing. And between 1932 and the New Deal platform in 1936, that contract, that covenant was deemed worthless. It was deemed a nuisance and it needed to be eliminated. And the final act. At the same convention, the FDR got the party to abolish the rule that had stood since 1832. It's a 2/3 rule for the nomination of the candidate to represent the party in the presidential election. That rule was the one piece of leverage that the conservative, mostly Southern wing of the Democratic Party still had, their veto. And instead, FDR abolished the rule. So 1 week into Philadelphia, the president and his lieutenant draft the platform. The lieutenant chairs the committee and passes it. The promises that the dissenters stood on are erased. And the rule that gave them the veto is abolished. That's not a party purifying itself. That is a party being captured by one man. And 2 years later, in 1938, that same man, he went out and tried to purge the people who wouldn't bend the knee, inserting himself into Democratic primaries across the country, which was not a normal thing for a sitting president to do. Now, Mark Levin looks at all of that and he calls it the model. Hold on to that, because the Republicans did the exact same thing, and I was in the room for the last act of it. So here's the Republican version, and it lines up almost beat for beat. Start with the covenant. The 2016 Republican platform, 50-some pages, argued over, written down, adopted by delegates. It was the product of the grassroots from around the country. And it's full of the exact same principles that my organization and this show is built on. It invokes George Washington by name. It affirms the wisdom of Washington's warnings to avoid foreign entanglements and unnecessary alliances. It defends Article 1, all legislative powers vested in Congress, granted by the people, and meant to remain solely with the people's elected representatives. And in it, it even names Obama, the sitting president's abuses of it, and names this one specifically. It said he failed to consult Congress regarding military action overseas. The party, in writing, condemned a president taking the country to war without Congress. And it even calls the Constitution the party's enduring covenant. So on war, on the Constitution, on executive power, the 2016 platform was on my side of almost every argument I make. Washington, Article 1, no military action without Congress. That was the official grassroots adopted position of the Republican Party as recently as 2016. Remember that, because I need you to watch and see what happened to it. The 2016 platform was so settled, so much the property of the grassroots, that in 2020, the Trump apparatus did something with no precedent in the history of American political parties. And I mean that literally. Let me give you a number. The Republican Party has adopted a platform in every single presidential convention since 1856, which was the very first one for the Republican Party. Through the Civil War, through 2 world wars, the Depression, Watergate, 42 conventions in a row. 42 for 42. Then in 2020, for the only time in 164 years, the party adopted no platform at all. The American Presidency Project, which catalogs every platform from every party, lists 2020 with a single note where the platform should be, and it says, see 2016. The party didn't rewrite the platform. They abolished the act of writing one. Instead, they passed a resolution. And the key line is one of the most quietly damning sentences in modern American politics. It says, and I quote, "The Republican Party has and will continue to enthusiastically support the president's America First agenda." Look at what that statement does. A platform is the people telling the leader what they stand for. This flips the arrow. The party now stands for whatever the president's agenda is, not principles the president must serve, his agenda, full stop, as the one thing that the party serves. Thank you, dear leader, for the chance to be blessed by your accomplishments. Never mind that we voted for no new wars, cheaper gas, an economy that works for the working man. Thank you for your platform, rewritten and redefined every day. That's how it feels. But notice the words in that resolution. It didn't say the MAGA agenda. It said America First. It takes America First, which is Washington's, Jefferson's, Bob Taft's, older than the parties themselves, and binds it to one man as his possession, the president's America First agenda. Don't take my word for how completely the man and the movement have been fused. Here is Mark Levin saying it out loud.
MAGA is as strong as ever. In fact, the Republican Party is MAGA, and MAGA is Donald Trump's movement.
He said the party is MAGA, and MAGA is one man's movement. He says it like it's a strength. Follow it. The party equals the movement. The movement belongs to the man, so therefore, the party belongs to the man. Well, here's the flag that I'm going to plant, and I'll come back to it on this show over and over again in future episodes. America First is the principle, the inheritance. It existed before Trump, and it will outlast him. And it sits in judgment over every leader, including him. MAGA is, at most, one movement meant to serve that principle. The right order is America First is the standard, the movement is accountable to it, and the man is accountable to it. Trump, though, he inverts it. He says, I am MAGA. MAGA is America First. Therefore, America First is whatever I say. He collapses the principle, the movement, and the man into one person. So the principle can no longer judge him because he has become the principle. Here's the test that really exposes it. If America First is real, you can ask, does bombing Iran for another nation's objectives serve America first? The principal answer is no. But if America First just means whatever Trump does, the question then can't even be asked. A principle that you can't use to judge the leader isn't a principle anymore. It's a brand. And 2020 is the moment that the party traded the principle for a brand. But they went further. The same resolution in 2020 added this, and it should end the argument about who's the real defenders of this party. It says, quote, any motion to amend the 2016 platform or to adopt a new platform, including any motion to suspend the procedures that will allow doing so, will be ruled out of order. Ruled out of order in advance. They didn't even just decline to write a platform. They made it procedurally illegal to even propose one. They forbade the dissent before anybody could even voice it. I want you to think about just how anti-Republican that is. Not Republican like the party, small r Republican. Against the whole idea of a republic where authority rests in principles, not a person, and the governed, they instruct the government. That is not how a free people's party behaves. It's how a court behaves around a king. Even the Brookings Institute, which is no MAGA outfit, it titled its analysis of that resolution as L'État c'est moi, which means I am the state. Those are the words of Louis XIV. That's 2020. They locked the doors. Now, go forward to 2024. When I was standing inside the room, I was on the platform committee. And in 24, they couldn't just freeze the old platform again because there was a real convention. There was a real platform committee. People like me were elected to sit on it, so they ran the 1936 playbook instead. And they wrote a platform at the top and then forced it down as an edict. But I want you to understand what I brought into that room. I wasn't there with a personal hobby horse. I was sent to fight for one thing: the proper constitutional use of the American military, Article I war powers, a congressional declaration of war before we send our sons and daughters to fight in a foreign war, no entangled alliances, dragging us into other nations' fights, defend the guard legislation, the exact tradition this organization and this show is built on. Washington's, Jefferson's, the founders' originalist intent. And I'd done the work ahead of time. This wasn't a fringe idea that I cooked up. The coalition was already built. The foundation was already laid because that principle, Congress declares war. The guard doesn't go unless Congress has declared war. It was already written into Republican platforms at the state level all across the country. In my own state, Idaho, it was the second Republican Party in the nation to formally endorse Defend the Guard. Texas put it in their platform and then asked all Republican voters their opinion. And in 2024, 84% of Texas Republican primary voters backed it at the ballot box. It even received more votes from Republicans than Donald Trump did on the very same ballot. New Hampshire, they put it in their platform. So did Maine. In Arizona, the Republican members of the state Senate had passed it twice before. And in Virginia, Washington's Virginia, Jefferson's Virginia, the House of Delegates passed it 99-0. Not a single vote against it. That is the grassroots. That is the party writing down what it believes from the bottom up in state after state. I didn't go to Milwaukee for the convention with an oddball notion. I went carrying a principle the Republican base had already adopted in its own platforms at the state level. And I went to do exactly what a platform delegate is supposed to do: bring it to the national party and improve the document. Bring it into line with the Constitution and the founders' intent and the expressed will of the people. I was not sent there, one of two people from my entire state, to rubber stamp a document written to worship a man. Now I want to walk you through what happened. And I want to do it in order of how it happened because the story is absolutely unbelievable. And I'm going to separate what's already in the public record from what I witnessed with my own eyes. First, what we were told to expect, because the gap between that and what actually happened is the whole story. This was supposed to take days. The platform committee was scheduled to meet for days. Now I'm going to show you something. I brought this home with me. This is the orientation packet from the GOP Platform Committee in Milwaukee in 2024. I'll scan it and I'll put it in the show notes. But I wanted to show you, this is real. This exists. I have it in my hands. The schedule they handed us, it was real. I have it right here. This is the orientation packet for the 112 members of the Platform Committee. Orientation on Sunday evening, July 7th. Full committee hearings on Monday and Tuesday, and a Saturday session, the 13th, held in reserve if we needed more time to do the work. Days of work, hours upon hours, because that's what a platform committee does. It deliberates. It hears amendments from the states. It argues line by line, and it builds the document from the bottom up. And that is the entire reason that 112 of us flew to Milwaukee. We came to build something over days. Second, let's talk about the room itself. And this is already on the public record, confirmed by multiple delegates and multiple news outlets. When we arrived, we were sequestered behind closed doors. Every delegate had to seal their phone and their smartwatch in a Faraday bag, which is a signal blocking pouch, and only RNC or campaign staff could even open it. We had to go to them to get permission to open the Faraday bag to get our phones. When one member pulled out a laptop just to take his own notes, staffers and security physically took the computer from him. At least 50 RNC staffers, they lined the wall all around us, watching us, circling us like hawks. And the staff, they got to keep their phones. A delegate who'd served on 5 previous platform committees said it was nothing he'd ever seen before. And then you have to look at who was running the committee. The chair was a Trump loyalist, Senator Marsha Blackburn. The co-chair was Congressman Mike Waltz. We all know that name. He's now Trump's UN ambassador. But the people who actually controlled the document weren't the elected faces. The policy director was Russ Vought, architect of Project 2025, now running Trump's Office of Management and Budget. The deputy policy director on the committee was Ed Martin. He was a Stop the Steal organizer who addressed the crowd in Washington on the eve of January 6th. He's now the pardon attorney for the United States and the head of the Justice Department's weaponization working group. Those are the men that Trump installed to escort his platform through the committee process. This was not a neutral staff. These were his operatives, just like FDR back in the day. Third, and this is the moment the whole thing kind of turned. We sat down, sequestered, without our phones, without a computer, and we were immediately handed a finished platform. 16 pages already written, already complete. Not one of us had been allowed to see it beforehand. We hadn't been allowed to read it. There was no building it. There was no deliberating. There was none of that. It was all done before we ever walked in. And I've got it here. I'm going to show it to you. A couple things I want you to notice. There's a circled number in the bottom. Very plain, right? This is the 2024 GOP platform, Make America Great Again. And there's fewer than 120 copies of this version that exist. It has since been published and made public, but there are fewer than 120 copies of this. They're all numbered, so if they leaked at any time before it was published, before it was ratified, there would be a trail back to the leaker. And I have one. This is the document that they put in front of us, finished, and told us just to approve it. There was an immediate motion as soon as we got it to vote and approve the platform. We weren't given any time to even read it. There was to be no debate. There would be no dissension. The microphones were blocked. Blackburn rejected any attempts to make motions or even ask for clarification. Blackburn called for the vote, and the good boys and girls accepted the platform as it was without reading it. And if you do read it, there's no mistake about whose voice it's in. There's random capitalizations that are in the wrong place. There's a cadence that's easily identifiable. It's the rhythm of a Truth Social post rendered as a party platform. So you can draw your own conclusions about who actually wrote it. But here's what removed all doubt for me. Shortly after the vote, and shortly after we had just gotten there, to be frank, the man himself came on a live phone call to the entire committee. He thanked us for approving his platform. The candidate called the party's governing document his, out loud, to the people who were supposedly there to write it. It's not me inferring authorship from style identification only. That's the author taking credit on a live phone call in front of 112 delegates. In 1936, FDR called the platform the one he heartily subscribed to. It was the leader blessing his own reflection. And in 2024, Trump didn't even bother with subscribing to it. He just simply called it his own. And the whole thing was over before it began. 3 days of meetings on that schedule, they never happened. We approved the president's platform in the first hour of the first day. One man had already done the work, and there was nothing left for 112 delegates to do but say yes. Which brings me to the proof that this entire thing was theater, because the sham is written down in their own orientation packet. Right here, after the orientation page, it lists that we're going to break out into 6 subcommittees. We were supposedly going to break into these groups and deliberate. The committees were inflation, border security, economy, American civilization, constitutional government, and national security. Real committee work on paper. Except right underneath the list in this packet, it says the quiet part out loud. It says, and I quote, "This will not be your parents' platform. Instead of an unnecessarily verbose treatise filled with Washington jargon limited by the shackles of the lobbyist influence, our mission will be a streamlined platform reflecting President Trump's vision for America. Our goal is a winning platform for the people, not Washington insiders." Reflecting President Trump's vision, printed in the orientation packet. Before we debated a single word, they told us in writing whose document it was and that it was already created. And those subcommittees. When I arrived, I asked the staffers which one I'd be on. I was very curious. There had been no communication up to that point. Nobody knew. I asked a dozen people, maybe more. They kept pointing me to one man, and when I finally found him, I asked him, and he reached into his brown leather briefcase, and he pulled out a stack of papers on a clipboard, thumbed through them, and he told me I was on the inflation subcommittee. I have nothing to contribute to the inflation subcommittee. It's not why my state sent me, but here's the thing. I got to look at those papers that he was thumbing through. I got a good look at them. And there was not a roster of delegates and assignments at all. It was just random pages, credentials, logistics, unrelated paperwork. He was faking it. He pulled the inflation committee out of thin air because there was no roster, because there were no real subcommittees. There never were going to be. And because I was curious, I wanted to confirm my suspicions. And so I did it with my own feet. Remember, we were supposed to adjourn straight into those 6 subcommittee rooms. As soon as we were dismissed, after the platform was approved in that first hour, I walked the entire building and looked for the subcommittee rooms that were listed on our map. I found the rooms and I peeked inside. There were no tables. There were no chairs. There was no signage. There were no placards. There were no microphones. Empty rooms. The subcommittees that were supposed to be meeting at that very moment did not exist and never did. The entire structure was a stage set with no play behind it. The schedule, the subcommittees, the orientation, all of it was theater wrapped around a document that was finished before any of us arrived. We were not grassroots members of the party there to memorialize the desires of the people that make up the party. We were a standing ovation that had been booked months in advance. I want to read one more thing from that packet. Their words were, and I quote, "We seek to free our party from the shackles of lobbyist influence." Free from lobbyist influence. Let's just sit with that for a second. Hold it next to a war that this country is currently fighting, dragged into by a foreign lobby, and a congressman like Thomas Massie targeted by the money of a lobby that serves another nation's interests. Free from the shackles of lobbyist influence. That line, it just rings in my ears. Now, the part that's mine to tell. I want to be precise about it because the truth here matters more than the drama that surrounds it. There was a minority report, which is a formal way to put dissent on the record. It was filed over the gutting of the pro-life language, and 19 delegates signed it. It is now the only surviving record from that closed room meeting. I originally signed it too. Not because the abortion plank was my fight, but as a protest against the process, against being steamrolled. But because I try to always be intellectually honest, I took my name off of it. I want you to know why, because it could easily be used to claim that I was intimidated into it, and that's not the honest version. I withdrew because that minority report was a pro-life protest. And as much as I respect those delegates, and as much as I am staunchly pro-life plank was not the fight my state sent me to wage. In Idaho, we fought that fight. My fight was Article 1, war powers, no entangled alliances, defend the guard. To attach my name to somebody else's cause, even one I'm sympathetic to make my point about process would not have been intellectually honest. I wasn't going to borrow another man's flag to fly my own grievance, so I pulled my name, not to bend the knee, but to keep my argument clean. But here's what happened after I withdrew. This tells you how the machine works, whether it's Republican or Democrat. Once I stopped making noise, the doors literally opened. The palace was available to me. I was suddenly handed access that I'd never been given as a regular platform delegate. This was the credential I was given to wear around my neck for the platform committee. And these are all access passes that I was given afterwards to go anywhere that I wanted, to roam the other committees, rules, credentials, the whole operation, to work with staffers behind the scene to intimidate other members of other committees. This one, the staff one, this invited me into backroom deals where strategy was made. All because I decided to be honest to my fight and I stopped making noise. I want to be honest about this. I didn't earn any of this. I didn't earn these credentials. That one, the platform I did. I didn't earn these. I wasn't elected by any committee to get them. They were given to me. They showed up after I went quiet. That's the machine. It threatens you with the loss of everything you earned, and the moment you stop fighting, it hands you a shiny pass and gives you run of the building. First the stick, then the carrot. I don't want to hide this. I'm holding it up. You can see exactly what the reward for silence looks like. I took the access and I held my tongue at the time, but I am not holding it anymore. Because Mark Levin is celebrating and encouraging the FDR style of purification of the party, and that has made it necessary to speak out and to identify the dangers of what he is applauding. That's the capture. It's finished. The platform was written. It was written at the top by the president and rushed through a committee by his operatives. A committee turned into a rubber stamp in under an hour. There were phantom subcommittees with empty rooms, the leader claiming the document is his own on a live call, and the holdouts, the people standing where the 2016 platform stood, where Washington stood, where Article 1 stands, steamrolled, then soothed with a pass, with a trinket, with shiny badges so that we could go in and around the committee, the convention, whenever we wanted. We were given access. I didn't read about this. I was in the damn chair. I experienced it, and that is my testimony, recorded and preserved now forever. So let's put the two stories side by side, just for the record, just to make sure we're clear. Franklin Roosevelt in 1932, there was a covenant. It included a balanced budget, sound money, and limited government. He breaks it. In 1936, he has it rewritten to match what he's already done and what he wants to continue doing. His lieutenant chairs the committee, and the rule that gave any dissenters a veto is abolished. In 1938, he purges members who stayed loyal to the original covenant. Donald Trump, 2016, there was a covenant. Washington's warning, Article 1, no war without Congress. 2020, he doesn't rewrite it, he freezes it. He rules any change to it out of order, and he binds the party to his agenda. And in 24, a finished platform written by him and his operatives, handed down, ratified in under an hour by a committee with its phones sealed in Faraday bags, and now the primaries and the purge. Thomas Massie, the personal destruction of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Joe Kent, the people who still stand where the party stood in 2016, where the candidate himself stood when he came down the golden escalator, when he built the broadest coalition in a generation. The same move both times. A leader who couldn't win the arguments inside of his own party. So he changed what the party was allowed to say. Then he went after the people who remembered the old words. 36, it was FDR who rewrote the platform, and in 20, Trump froze it, and in 24, he replaced it. Slightly different tactics. One constant underneath it all. No platform that the people wrote. Only the platform that the leader allows. That's not purity, Mark Levin. That is not improving the Republican Party, Mark Levin. Whatever the dishonest, unintelligent Mark Levin says, that is a king. And the people they purged weren't the deviation. They were the last ones keeping the covenant. Now, back to the man who told you this was Republican. Levin told you Trump is improving or purifying the party to match its platform. You've now seen all four platforms, 2 from the Democrats, 3 from the Republicans. Let's grade him against the documents he obviously didn't read. Strike 1. He says being like FDR is the Republican ideal. But in 1932, it proves FDR didn't honor his party's covenant. He broke it and rewrote it. So be like FDR doesn't mean be faithful to your party platform. It means the opposite. Levin, he reached for an analogy and never bothered to check to see if it was accurate, only if it served the man that he was interested in serving. It is not the work of a serious man. Strike 2, he claims to revere the party's principles. But the 2016 platform, the real, the grassroots one, attacks executive overreach and condemns a president who failed to consult Congress on military action overseas. The platform that Levin says he honors condemns the exact thing Levin is now cheering. He's either never read it or he's hoping that you haven't. Neither one is the profile of an honest broker. And strike number 3, where it stops being laziness and becomes a con. Levin knows what the 2020 resolution said. He knows the party bound itself to the president's agenda and ruled dissent out of order. He knows the 24 platform was Trump's document. A man who built a brand on constitutional originalism and the dangers of executive tyranny cannot look at the party abolishing its own platform for one man's agenda and honestly call it purification. He knows the word for it. He won't say it, but I will. The word is capture. The very thing he spent 30 years warning you about. And he looked right at it and he called it strength because the man doing it is a man Levin has chosen to serve, because that man is delivering Levin's highest priority, Israel's wars. Mark Levin is Israel first. And watch how he treats the people who won't bend the knee. Watch how fast the man who calls this purification turns dissent into treason.
We've had the so-called anti-war types who don't want victory. And so you don't get victory.
He says the so-called anti-war types who don't want victory. That's what he calls a veteran who asks for a vote before a war. A copperhead, if you know anything about history. A defeatist. It's the same slur thrown at every American who ever asked the question the Constitution actually requires. Should we be doing this at all? Asking Congress to do its job is not defeatism. It is the law. And a man who calls it cowardice is telling you exactly how little the law means to him. So the verdict, as plain as I can see it, where the truth serves Mark Levin, he ignores it. He didn't read the platforms. He didn't check the analogy. He didn't do the work. And where the truth threatens the man he's protecting, he buries it. He knows it's capture and he calls it purity anyway. He's lazy where laziness is easy. He's dishonest where dishonesty is useful. That's not a constitutional scholar like he calls himself. That's a court jester with a microphone. A man comparing a sitting president to Franklin Roosevelt as a compliment. He's too incurious to see or too dishonest to admit that the comparison is an indictment. It's sub-80 IQ clickbait dressed up as history, and it only works because he's betting that you won't go read the 90-year-old platform to fact check him. Well, we did. And he's wrong on every bit of his praise and on his analogy. So one more thing about the man telling your family to go to war. Mark Levin never served, not a day in uniform. He went to Temple University and then Beasley School of Law. He was then a lawyer and a staffer in the Justice Department. It's a fine career. It's just not one that ever required him to carry a weapon or bury a friend or stand in the breach with his own life on the line. And I'll be fair. I'm not calling him a draft dodger. We all know he came of age after the draft ended. He simply never went voluntarily, just like most Americans never go. And that by itself is no sin. The problem is this. A man who never carried the weight has made himself the loudest voice in America for putting it on your children. He sits on a presidential security council. He makes the case for war on false intelligence. Then he moves the goalposts, changing the definition of success as often as he changes his sweat-stained button-up shirt. He calls himself the most America First man on television, and he tells you that fighting other nations' wars is the height of republicanism. And that copying the greatest enemy of small r republicanism, FDR, is improving the party. The pattern never changes. The men hungriest for the war are the men furthest from its costs. It's always somebody else's son on the airplane. It's always somebody else's daughter under the flag. I've carried the weight. And a man who calls a party surrender to one ruler purification while pushing your kids towards a war that his own party platform once condemned has not earned the right to lecture anybody about what's Republican or about what's America first. So here's where I land. When Levin asks you to cheer for this purge, ask the only question that matters. Who moved? Did the men standing on Washington's warnings in Article 1, did they move? Or did the man who rewrote the covenant move and demand that you call it loyalty? You already know the answer. So does Mark Levin. He's just betting that you won't do shit about it. It's time that we prove him wrong. I'm going to ask you for 3 things. Number 1, go to bringourtroopshome.us. Join us. Add your name to the people who believe that Congress, not the president, not some loudmouth pundit, decides when America goes to war. Number 2, if you can, chip in a few bucks to fuel the fight. We are the driving force behind the Defend the Guard legislation, which is a bill that we've introduced in over 30 states that keeps your National Guard out of foreign wars of choice unless Congress has declared war. Levin wants you to think it's fringe, but it's alive in state houses across this country. The one place left where the grassroots still gets a vote that can't be ruled out of order. Number 3, just share this episode, like it, comment on it, give us a rating. Send it to anybody who may have heard Mark Levin, and there aren't many left that are under 700 years old. But there are some people out there that heard him and maybe even believe him. Send them the documents. They're in the show notes. Let them check it themselves. That's the whole game. He's counting that you won't do it. The party of Washington and Jefferson believed the people decide when their sons and daughters die in war. That belief did not leave the Republican Party. It was written out of the platform by men who rule like kings and call it purity. Our job is to write it back for the Constitution and for the Republic. We'll see you next time.